¿Cómo estamos, mi gente? Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Aquí les saluda Rafico. Yo estoy bien y espero que ustedes mucho mejor. Bueno, bienvenidos aquí a un nuevo video reacción. En esta ocasión vamos a ver cómo elaborar el, cómo la diadema que usa la variante de Loki, la variante mujer, con un cacho roto, como el tuyo. Bueno, ya sabes, dale play.
Welcome to the shop, my friend Steve here at SKS Props, and in today's video I have a new build from the Loki series, Lady Loki's Crown. Now this of course is made all out of my HD foam, which you can find over at Blick Art Materials, and because of that it is extremely lightweight. Now I know what you're saying, Steve, you just made Loki's Crown, and I did. You can see that video in my channel as well, but you can see
De Loki de la variante de Loki mujer.
the size difference between the two is pretty dramatic, and I had to make all new templates for this particular one. And those templates are absolutely free, and you can find them over on my website. Now, I want to show you what it takes to put Lady Loki's crown together, so let's go ahead and get started. After creating Loki's crown not long ago, I had a pretty good sense of what it would take to put this one together. So I took the main body of the crown template and transferred that onto some 6mm HD foam. The detail piece for the middle of the crown was also cut out of some 6mm foam, and just like my previous version, I'm going to remove some material from the middle of this piece so the angle comes together better. To cut the groove in the back of the foam, I'm going to be using a stone bit barrel. The top of this barrel gives a really sharp cut into the foam.
Hay que rebajarlo un poquito en el borde para poder plegarlo. Si no tienes Dremel, funcionaría creo que con una lija o un estilete o como le llaman un cúter. Estilete y cúter lo que le comes.
Foam, which is going to work great when we glue these pieces together. Before I glue the halves together though, I'm going to scribe some detail lines into the foam with a hobby knife. After lightly hitting the foam with a heat gun, you can see
O sea, solo le haces el corte, no lo traspasas completamente, supongo. Solamente una incisión por encima, pero que no complete cortar.
how these lines will open up, giving this piece some really crisp details. Some weldwood contact cement can now be applied to the grooves on the back. After the contact cement had been allowed to dry, the pieces were then folded together, and you can see how this technique gives the front of the crown a really nice angle. Using the stone bit again, I round over all the line details on the front piece, and I hit it with a heat gun again to seal the foam and manipulate the top. I like
Esos relieves, como decía, lo puedes trabajar bien con lija. Una lija le vas y pules y le das forma. Ahora, si tienes una buena destreza utilizando el estilete del cúter, como te decía, también le puedes cortar y darle esa forma redondeada.
lightly mark onto the main body of the crown with a pencil exactly where this detail piece is going to go. Then by using some Bob Smith superglue, I can press it into place. Like you've seen me do in numerous other builds, I'm going to glue some strips of 2mm foam to the back of this mask. And as you can see, I'm gluing the strips to the back while the mask is rounded. This will make sure that this prop retains its shape and won't ever go flat. Now the horn templates for this crown are quite a bit smaller than the male version of Loki's. The template was traced onto some 4mm foam, making sure to mark all the registration points. I'm going to start with an angled cut at the tip and then work to a flat cut when I get to the base of the horn. This process will help the horn glue together a little bit easier rather than it just being a flat cut all the way around. My rotary tool is used to remove some of the material from the tip of the horn, and then a heat gun is used to seal the foam and help round it over. Weldwood contact cement.
Yo creo, bueno, yo desde mí, que si se hace se coge espumafón, no sé cómo lo conozcan, pero es espumafón. Y le dan la forma, creo que sería un poquito más tedioso, pero creo que más rápido. O sea, pegar eso ahí, es como que, no sé, al menos yo no creo que me quedaría bien.
is going to be generously applied to the edges of this horn. Just like the large horns that I'd done for the other Loki crown, I start at the base of the horn and line up all my registration points to the top. As you can see from this demo, I hit the registration points and then go back to press the rest of the seam together. Once the outside's done, I can then flip the horn over and press together the seam on the interior. Now your seam may not be very pretty, but we'll clean it up with a rotary tool a little later on. Now the great thing about this build is that one of our horns is broken, so the horns themselves don't have to be perfectly symmetrical. So I take my template again and transfer it onto some 4mm foam, but this time I don't trace the entire horn, only about the lower half. But the process is the same. Glue is applied, the horn is pressed together, and I use some scissors to cut off some excess foam. Using my Dremel rotary tool and a smooth sanding drum, I can now clean up my seams. And just like I had done for the horns for the other Loki, I added some small striations to the horn just to give it an additional texture. Now if you haven't watched my video on how I make my smooth sanding drums, I'll put a link up above, but you should definitely check it out. The heat gun is used lightly once again to help seal the foam and smooth everything over. And you can see just how well this little horn turned out. Because the crown has been rounded, some of the material at the base of the horn will need to be removed with a rotary tool. This will allow the horn to sit flush against the face of the crown, so I can go ahead and glue it to the headpiece with some Bob Smith super glue. This process is also going to be repeated for the broken horn. The only thing that changes is that I sketch on and remove some more material just to give the broken horn a more unique look. I also cut and insert a small round piece of foam and glue that into the top of the horn. This is going to act as a cap where I can still add some foam clay to bulk it out. Material is removed from the backside, and just like the longer horn, this can now detail strips of 2mm foam are cut. These will be applied to the base of the horn to cover up your seam and give it an additional detail. When you get to the top of the horn, just try to glue it together as best you can.
¿Han visto estos manes de, no me acuerdo el nombre, pero tiene que ver con arte? Ellos hacen así mismo estos accesorios y armas de series y videojuegos, pero esos manes lo hacen con reales, con acero, con cuero y cosas así, pero demasiado increíble. O sea, tienes que tener más que todo dinero, presupuesto para poder hacer algo así, porque, o sea, imagínate, tienen forja, tienen tantos utensilios que, pero es increíble. Creo que todo fanático de este mundo, con cualquier pieza, con la más sencilla, la menos relevante, estaría más que emocionado que lo exequien una vez, te lo juro.
But you can fill this with some foam clay or quick seal later on. Now this crown doesn't really have a bunch of details to it, so adding these little strips helps give it that overall effect. To fill in the top of the broken crown to look as though it's solid, I'm going to be using some of my foam clay. I wet the foam with a little bit of water, and then I compress the foam clay into the cavity. Then by using my fingers and some silicone tip tools, I can sculpt in the desired effect. I also glued strips of 2mm foam to the back side of the cheek sections to help keep them formed as well. Because I don't need all of the material, I just kind of need a skin of it. I use my rotary tool to remove a lot of the 2mm foam. The crown itself is almost complete. I just need to let it sit and let the foam clay dry. I come back the next day and my foam clay has dried enough that I can now use my rotary tool to smooth out the seams. I also use the rotary tool to smooth out the broken section on the horn and add a few more cut-in details. After a final heat treatment, I glue a small piece of scrap foam to the back of the crown. This will allow me to hold the crown while I spray it from different angles.
El video anterior de la máscara del doctor, vi que le estaba pegando eso, ¿y eso para qué le digo si después no va a poner? Y después me puse que obviamente que un soporte es para poder sostenerlo sin mancharse los dedos, sin manchar la máscara.
To seal my foam, I'm going to be generously spraying in a few layers of Plasti Dip. I applied a layer, allowed it to dry, and then applied another. After the Plasti Dip had been allowed to cure, I could then add some Krylon Red Oxide Primer. This will give me a good base for the gold that I'm going to apply as my final layer. Just like my other Loki crown, I'm going to be using some Rust-Oleum Bright Coat Metallic Finish Gold. This gold is extremely opaque and does a fantastic job covering. With the paint dry, I can now remove that foam scrap support. Using some Mars Black and a small brush, I can paint into the detail lines that I had created earlier.
En aquí se notan más imperfecciones que una máscara del Doctor Doom. Me imagino que haber sido porque fueron como 3 capas de pintura. Aquí le he hecho el fondo y encima lo pinto con spray. Pero en la del Doctor Doom le echó primero el fondo. Y recuerden que ahí le echó otro plateado. Y de ahí le hizo las pátinas con la brochita o el pincel.
To attach the crown, I'm going to be using some small strips of elastic band. Now you could have a single strip and just have it wrap all the way around, but I thought by having 2 strips it would make it more adjustable and you could just tie the elastic for each wearer. Small strips of 2mm foam were glued on top, just as an additional reinforcement.
Esto es lo que yo me refería al video pasado, de que de ley tienen que ponerle algo más para que logre aguantar, porque así la silicona en sí no os va a soportar. Estoy 100% seguro de que no lo va a soportar, porque ya me ha pasado, o sea, yo ya he hecho vainas así y no queda bien. Te lo pones, se vuela esa vaina.
For the straps. And with that, our crown is complete, and I got to have some fun with my daughter doing her best Lady Loki impression.
Igual se ve increíble, bro. Bueno, y hasta aquí el video de hoy. Ya sabes, si te gustó, dale like, no te olvides suscribirte y déjame tu comentario para saber qué te pareció y algún consejo que me quieras dar. Como siempre, lo vamos a estar leyendo. No te olvides seguirme por Twitch como Box Temporis. Igual te va a estar apareciendo a cada rato jodiéndote ahí. Gracias, gente. Nos vemos. Chao, chao.